everybody. Thank you so much for joining us on this sunny Saturday morning. My name is Esme and I'm a producer for the How To Academy, and you've tuned in to Inkspots, an Inkspots event with Sita Brahmachari. Sita is not only a best-selling author, but she's also an ambassador for Amnesty International. She's going to be giving a short talk today about her brilliant book, When Secrets Set Sail, which looks like this. I'm sure you've all got a copy. And I'm sure you know lots about it, but it's fascinating and she's going to be telling you more. So after she gives this talk, it'll be over to you to interview her. So please put lots of questions in the Q&A box and we'll get through as many as you can. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Sita Brahmachari.
Thank you so much, Esme. Welcome to my story hive. You can see behind me, I've got some lovely treasure from my book, and I'm going to share some of that with you. One of the pieces of treasure is a doll here that was given to me when I was very young by an auntie in India. And I always thought this doll had a story to tell. And in a way, she sparked my imagination to write When Secrets Set Sail. There's another piece of treasure. There's lots of treasure in my story, When Secrets Set Sail, that Imtiaz and Usha and Cosmo, the characters, have to discover. They have to go on a kind of storytelling quest, really, to discover the history of their house, which is a very, very amazing history. And part of the history is hidden in this conch shell. So all around me, whenever I'm writing stories, I find treasure. It's the most amazing thing to be a writer. It's like you get to do a treasure hunt every day. So I hope I'm going to take you on a little bit of this treasure hunt. I'm going to share my screen now and show you some photographs from my book, When Secrets Set Sail. So here we are in the same place that you're at, in the Story Hive. This is where I create my work. And what a fantastic job it is for me to be able to spend my time writing books, imagining. As a child, I would spend a lot of time doodling and daydreaming. And if there was an event like this when I was a child, which of course there wasn't, because we didn't have all of this tech, I would be doodling my way through the session. So please, if you've got a piece of paper with you and some colour pens, as I'm talking, kind of doodle your own ideas that come out of me talking. So my house, When Secrets Set Sail, is set in a real house, in a real road in Hackney. It's King Edward's Road in Hackney, and here's the house, or a rendition of the house, by artist Evan Hollingdale on the cover. And there's two girls you can see at the top of that house, and they're Imtiaz and Usha. But Usha has lived in the house, and her family has lived in the house for a very, very long time in my story. But Imtiaz, who has been adopted by this family, has only just moved in. So she has her ears and eyes open to everything that's happening in the house. And you can see also on the roof, there's a cat. And if any of you are interested in perspective, you'll see that the cat is oversized because this cat may just have supernatural power. The top of the house is not a house at all. It's a ship. That's a fantastic thing you can do when your imagination is sparked by stories. So I'm going to invite you now to enter Imtiaz and Usha's dreaming room, their bedroom. So whatever harsh realities there are in the world, and Imtiaz and Usha do understand that because Usha has just lost her grandmother. Imtiaz has just been adopted and is very nervous to be in this new house. And the downstairs of this house is a refugee centre. So the people in this house understand that the world is complex and difficult, but they've got this space and it's their dreaming room. And you can see, if you look in the picture, it's got anchors and it's got sails. It's got beautiful artwork. Imtiaz loves whales. I wrote about having my World Book Day book with a whale. And there's also this enormous portal window. What I like to do with my stories, the kind of stories that I like to read when I was your age, is I'd like to step from my world into another world. And I don't know if you've ever had that feeling of when you've been reading a book and your parents or your carer saying, right, now it's time to switch off a light. And you go, there is no way that I can read these characters at this point. I like to write for young people like that, so that you, when you're reading the story, think, I am with that character. I am in that character's perspective. And it's as if I am Imtiaz and as if I am Usha. And it's as if I'm flying in those beds. It's the first day that I've moved into this new and strange house. And I'm hearing the whispers of ghosts in this house, which is what happens to Imtiaz. when I was little, I never thought that I would be a writer, and I never thought that I would be the kind of person that would write all of these books. But I always knew, because my father was from India and my mum was from the Lake District, and I used to go to India sometimes in the holidays, and I know that some of you will have family elsewhere in the world or elsewhere in the country. And very few people always have their family living in the same village and staying there for all generations on generations. So that's where stories come from, really. Stories are always about arrivals and departures and the stories that happen in between. And my dad, I was very shy as a child, and you can see that girl wearing a sari. I always used to think about, oh, my identity and my history. And I used to think about what my dad's history was like and what my mum's history was like. And I think as a child, I was always doing this thing that's in the story When Secrets Set Sail, and piecing together the different histories of my family. And sometimes when I write my book, young people start to do that too. And they go away from reading When Secrets Set Sail, that I hope they enjoy, or Jasmine Skies, or whatever, Where the River Runs Gold, these kind of adventures that I offer you. And they start to write their own story. So that's kind of my secret mission. So here's my dad on the left-hand side with the pigeons, holding the camera, and he used to tell us stories when we were children. And he used to tell us stories in his voice, which was different to the way I speak English. I'm going to slip into that voice for you now, so you can see that in my story When Secrets Set Sail, I have lots of voices of different people. Lots of voices of different people in different generations and from history. And sometimes when I used to learn about history at school, I used to kind of think, oh, they're people from a long time ago. And particularly sometimes when we'd learn about kind of, kings and queens and things like that, it felt far away. But I didn't think of my own family history or the own history of my street as what history was about. But my dad was a person that made me think otherwise. He used to speak like this to me. You know, Sita, when I first came to this country in 1959 to be a doctor in the National Health Service, everything was strange to me. We had this idea of what England was, and there was this very handsome actor called Marlon Brando. You can go and Google it, who this person was, this actor. And we all thought that all English people wore these smart coats like this. So we spent all our rupees, all our money on these coats. But underneath these coats, we were wearing tank tops. You know what it is, a tank top? It's like a bright, warm jumper to keep you warm with no sleeves. And all of our tank tops that we were wearing, all these doctors were wearing the same tank tops, which were knitted by their mother. Before the time of Facebook and Google and, email, and it was very difficult to contact our parents and our families. I did not see my brothers and sisters for so many years. Yeah, you can see when you read When Secrets Set Sail, that little girl Sita listening to these stories. And I'm sure that in your family, they have stories like this, or you probably have somebody in your family, or a carer like Intia, who has Dalise, who looks after her. And when they tell a story, you kind of lean in and you just never want them to stop telling stories. But I was lucky enough to have people like that in my family. And they were really the inspiration for me to write this story, When Secrets Set Sail. And you can see this is my notebook. That's how I start my stories. I hope you're doodling if you've got pen and paper. You might even be starting your own story today. But this is how I started my story. When Secrets Set Sail, there was a very nasty speech called The Rivers of Blood in the 1960s, and my story goes back not to the 60s, but to Victorian times in that house in Hackney. It like takes you back behind all the layers of wallpaper and all the paint to the whole history of the house. And the people who are discovering this history are Intia and Usha. Now, Intia finds a conch shell, and in the conch shell, she puts it to her ear, and she can't hear her own ear canal. She can't hear what sounds like the sea. And she's very inquisitive, Intia, so she goes inside and she tries to unblock it. And inside the conch shell, she finds what she thinks is a handkerchief, but it is not a handkerchief at all. It is a piece of a woman's sari. You see here for embroidery and the name Lucky. Well, she puts the conch back to her ear and says, oh my goodness, I can hear something in this conch. It's the voice of a woman. If you believe in me, set my story free. Please, please, I have been waiting for you all this time. Please, set my story free. I need you to know what the history of this house is. And so it sets these girls off on a quest across London, to the museums, to the galleries. I don't want to tell you to where, but on some dangerous adventures. And a boy, Cosmo, who they meet on the way, to discover the history of a woman like this. Now, I did lots of research to write this book, because I didn't know much about the history of this house. But Indian ayahs were nursemaids who brought the children of the British Empire back on the long ship journey to England. And sometimes they brought them to school, sometimes they brought them to their homes. And they were working class women from rural areas often in India and across the empire, who would really love these children, you know, like a nanny or a carer or an au pair or somebody like that. They'd really love these children, and they would take them to their homes and take this long ship journey that my dad also described that he took. And they would often get left and abandoned, and they would just be left on the streets, just walking around. So in my research, I found this piece of research, and in my mind, the character of Lucky, and that's not really her name because her name was taken from her. In my mind, that's how I picture that's who it is. I kind of brought together this doll and this piece of research. And you can't probably see very close up, but on this piece of research, it says Anthony Iyer. Doesn't have a name. It's like she belongs to that family that she worked for. So I thought, right, I'm really going to discover this history of this house. I'm really going to do the archive research. I'm really going to peel behind the wallpaper of this house. That is a real house in Hackney that you can go to see, and discover what went on there. I don't want to tell you too much because I want you to read the story. But this is me and a young woman who's got an Instagram site called @Iotone, who is campaigning for this very house that I've written about in my book to have a blue plaque, that these women who had this amazing journey be recognized in history. So one day when you walk up this road, if you've read this book, you might find a blue plaque and you might think, oh, I read Sita's book. Oh, I know what this house is now. And why is that important? I kept thinking that all the way through writing the book. I think it is important to know the history of a place and who belongs there in the past. It really intrigues me. And so it got me really looking into the research of history. And in my story, it kind of brings together different histories. So it's not just like history that was in the past and has nothing to do with it. The girls are living in that house, so it's kind of part of them. But also Imtiaz, she is adopted and looked after by a wonderful social worker called Dalil, who herself has had her identity taken away from her with the Windrush scandal that you should go and research about, which is part of contemporary history, where people who worked and lived in this country all of their lives had their passports taken from them. So I was very interested in these kind of links in history as I was writing the book. But as well as that history, this story is basically an adventure story. So it sends you off. You might even know this place, but it sends Imtiaz Usha off to discover a boy on this barge called Cosmo. Don't want to tell you too much. It sends them off to a hospital in London, which is also a school, some of you might have heard about, where it was founded by the first woman to qualify as a doctor in Britain. It sends them to all these places to find those little pieces of the handkerchief that Lucky has placed in the places that she went to. In my dreams, the house will one day get a blue plaque. And in my dreams, my story will inspire you to explore the histories of your street, the histories of your families, or your carers, or people that you're fascinated in, and to place yourself in the story, because that's all storytelling is. And guess what? My secret aim might just come true, that from Sita Brahmachari's stories spring hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of other stories where untold histories get surfaced, so that the conch shell is no longer blocked. This is the Blue Plaque Project, and you might want to, it's on the Hachette site, and you might want to go down your street and discover the history of a house or a factory or something in your area that you just think, ooh, that's really quite spooky, that building. I know there's a history there that's not discussed. Or a person that you think should be commemorated that isn't commemorated in your community. And I'm going to cheat because I am a little bit of a rule breaker. In the real blue text, the person has to be dead for 20 years. But what if there's somebody amazing that lives in your community right now that should be commemorated? How about that? We can do our own blue text thing because we're a fiction writer, and we're creating stories. And you could send your blue text to Hachette, and it might just end up in the Conch Gallery. So from imagination to reality, from my storytelling to yours. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now. I have got a reading, and if you, when I've answered your questions at the end, I might do the reading, but I'm so interested now to hear what your questions are.
Hi, Sita. Thank you so much for that. That was brilliant. We have got lots of questions, but if you've got any yourself, send them in through the Q&A box and I'll try and get to them. Our first question is from Sylvia, who's 7. And she says, when you're writing, are you ever afraid people might think your ideas are silly? And if so, how do you overcome this fear?
Oh, yeah, that's such a good question. I do often think my ideas are silly. And you know, sometimes it took me a very long time to show my writing to lots of people. And think that I could be a published writer. I used to be very secretive about my writing, and actually, I don't think my teachers at school knew I was very good at writing because I used to write at home, and then when I was given an essay at school, I couldn't really do it. So I thought all my home ideas were silly, and it ended up being all my home ideas ended up being all these books. So what I would say to you is, just carry on. You know, my ideas are silly, and they end up as books too.
That's great advice. Rebecca, who's 8, she wants to know, how long does it take to write a book? And did you have to do a lot of research for When Secrets Set Sail?
Oh, that's a really good question. So the ideas for this story started when I was a child, you know, with my dad talking about his identity and his history and all of those things. But the actual sitting at the desk writing it took me about a year and a half. And I get the first draft out quite quickly. I don't worry about spelling or grammar or structure or anything. So my poor editor, Tig Wallace at Hachette, you know, he gets this splurge on a page, and it's kind of like stream of consciousness. It's like a river flowing of ideas, and then he has to kind of go, oh yes, that ghost bit is really good. Oh, Sita, that tension between those two girls is really good. Can you ramp that up a bit? Yeah. So you get help from your editor, and then it takes you on to the next draft and the next draft and the next draft. I'm a bit of a perfectionist with my writing. So I like the polishing bit at the end. And often I annoy my editors a lot because I get new ideas right at the end. And then writing is a bit like, you know, when you stack up dominoes, and if you change one thing, then all of the other things have to change too. So that's a bit of an annoying writerly trait, but I don't seem to have been able to learn to do anything else from that.
Amina, who's 11, just asked a question about how you stay motivated. They asked, what helps you spark ideas and how do you keep going with books for so long?
That's a very good question too. I mean, you really, I mean, it's a shame that I can't see you. But when I've written the book, I get to go and meet loads of young people and chat. I like the bit where I present about the book and you get people putting their hands up. But I've got this sort of strange eye where I'm always drawn to the person in the corner of the room that's kind of leaning in but isn't putting their hand up in a hall. And that person always comes to me at the end and buys a book or whatever, and I sign it, and they always tell me something that I want to be writing. And I keep those people in my head when I'm writing because that's how I was when I was that age. And sometimes Amina's a very nice name. I don't think I've got an Amina in any of my books. I've got Amira, of course, in Architect Hearts, but I sometimes ask people if I can have their names for my book because that's how I come up with some of the names for my stories. So yeah, I do miss that. You inspire me, and how I keep going, how I keep motivating is the story sort of charges me. So it's almost so. So I'll tell you a funny story. My son, when I came downstairs and I was writing a book one day, when it was a refugee child called Jide Jackson in my first novel, Architect Heart. And I've got refugee children in this story, and Refugee Week next week. So I was really thinking about these children. I really care about these children in my book. And my son said, "Mum, what's the matter? What happened?" And I said, "Oh, it's really terrible. This is the situation with Jide." And he's saying, "Mum, it's not real. It's one of your stories." And I said, "Well, it isn't real, but it is real." because it's kind of something that's happening in the real world that I've taken in my imagination to tell a story. So the children in my stories also motivate me.
Hannah, who's 9, has asked a great question. She says, what do you imagine happens to Imi, Usha and Cosmo when they start school? And will you ever write a sequel?
Wow, funny you should say that. I don't know if you read the World Book Day story. Did you read the World Book Day story? You might still be able to get hold of it. But what was really strange is I finished, so when I first wrote When Secrets Set Sail, Imtiaz wasn't really a big character. She was a very small character. I wrote the whole book in Usha's voice and I didn't like it. And then I thought, Imtiaz is a really big character. And then when I finished When Secrets Set Sail, I had a dream about Imtiaz and what would happen when she went to school. And Imtiaz and Usha and Cosmo are in this World Book Day, the River Whale story. And well, I don't want to give you a spoiler because in case you can get hold of it, it was very, very popular. I think a lot of people really enjoyed finding out what it was like for them in year 7, end of year 7 in the story, and what kind of confidence Imtiaz would grow and what kind of relationships Cosmo and Imtiaz would have. It's all in this story. And you can see on the cover, that is Imtiaz, and she is diving. And at the moment, for those of you who've read Where the River Runs Gold, which is about caring for environment, and it's the G7 summit at the moment where leaders of the world are kind of, trying to work out how we can actually get a future for our young people by sorting out the problems with the planet. So Imtiaz is going to be one of those people in the future that is going to be helping with that. You've got to read the story to find out. I hope you can get hold of one. If not, we're going to have to sort something out to do her ship.
Well, lucky Hannah, but the best thing in the world is when you want a sequel and then there's already one there for you. We've got a couple more questions about the book. Ben, who's 8, wants to know, is the painting in the book, which they go and see at the V&A, is that painting real?
Okay, that particular painting is not real, but the Calighat Gallery that I mentioned in the book is real. You can actually go to the Calighat Gallery. You know that Lucky makes her own sort of postcard art. And I love that it's the kind of art that, you might do a piece of art on the postcard. This is the kind of art that Lucky did. So it's art for everyone. So you can see that, but also those sort of classical paintings where there are ayahs. If you go on the At Aya's Home Instagram site, you can find loads of the paintings, which include ayahs, because it's a history, it's a hidden history. And because obviously the ayahs didn't have a voice or a place or status, they're just these characters that you see looking out of these paintings. And you can, in the silence, that's why I made her quiet, in the silence, there with an expression, you can see so much. Sometimes when people don't know you're looking at them, you can see so much about them. And because they think they're not important, the ayahs, in these paintings, they always draw your eye. So there's you can go on an ayah's home and find loads of paintings which are like the one I described.
A final question before we have a reading from you, because I think that would be a brilliant way to end. It's from Juliet, who's 9, and she wants to know, can you actually visit the Aya's house nowadays?
Yeah, you can't. Well, the thing is, you can go down the road and you can see it. And me and Fahana did go, and we sat on the steps, and something really spooky happened. I do quite like spooky things happening in my book and in reality. So we were sitting there on the steps, and this man and sitting with his child on his knee reading a story, opened the curtains and looked out at us like, what, because she was filming me. What are you doing on the steps? And then he came out of the door and he said, what are you doing? And so we told him the story of the house. And he went, I didn't know that. Why didn't I know that? I live in this house.
Wow.
And actually, when I finished writing the book, I put my head up because I get very immersed in my stories. And I saw that there was an event at Hackney Libraries. And, libraries are a big thing in the book. And for me in real life as well. And they're open now, which is fantastic. And there was an event at Hackney Libraries, which was Fahana talking about why this house should have a blue plaque. So it's like this weird thing of these things coming together. And also she's, quite a bit younger than me. So it was like this younger generation of people really going, no, we want to discover our histories. It's really important. So yeah, you can go, and one day there might be a blue plaque there.
That's fantastic. Listening to all of this just makes me want to go off and find out secret histories all around, and I'm sure lots of people will. But over to you to give a short reading. Thank you.
Okay, so I am going to read you the moment where Lucky appears to Imtiaz. Imtiaz picked up the conch and placed it over her ear. I'm not going to let her grief or whatever it is that's going on with her get inside my head, she reassured herself as the distant sound of the sea lulled her into sleep. Spirit stalked across the floorboards and climbed on the anchor, and the cat grew before her eyes. The sail screen opened, and a woman in a white sari beckoned Imtiaz out of bed. The woman turned, smiled gently, and patted her hands against her heart. Imtiaz followed her over to the globe window, and she gestured for Imtiaz to release the locks and bolts. I'm dreaming this, she told herself, following the woman out into the roof garden, where she stood looking down on the streets below. Turning around and pulling the train of her sari from over her shoulders, she offered Imtiaz the end. Slowly pirouetting, she unravelled the top layer of the material, where a small square had been cut out. She unfolded more cloth to reveal another space. Mesmerised, Imtiaz watched the woman's feet drum the ground as she turned faster and faster until she stood in a sari blouse and petticoat skirt. The fine white length of cloth caught on the breeze like a cresting wave. Now reaching into her blouse, the woman held a handkerchief square up to Imtiaz. In the corner was an embroidered pomegranate and a name. The woman clutched it to her chest. What are you saying? Is this yours? Are you lucky? Imtiaz asked. The woman smiled and sat on the drifted bench. Then, turning to her side, she picked up the conch and placed it on her knee, nodding towards the length of sari and waiting. Bending down, Imtiaz placed a piece of cloth in the first gap with a piecemeal. Now in the second, the shape was different, but in the third it fitted exactly. The handkerchief we found in the conch. Is it cut from the sari? Imtiaz asked. The woman nodded. You are lucky. The woman tilted her head from one side to the other, as if Imtiaz was both right and wrong. Sitting here in my dream with you feels like being with the leaves, Imtiaz whispered, feeling a calming breeze wash over her. I don't want you to go. Please don't go. Lucky held out her hand and counted off 3 fingers, pointing to the 2 other gaps in the sari. Why can't you speak? Imtiaz asked. Lucky placed the conch to Imtiaz's ear. Her mind flooded with the powerful surge of the sea, and beyond, deep in the waves' roar, she heard a distant whisper. Promise to keep me together, almost stories lost forever. Lucky raised the conch to her mouth and produced a sound, deep and mysterious, that swelled in power like a ship's horn calling across oceans. Oh!
Thank you, Sita. It's such a fantastic book. As the mystery gets going, you just get totally wrapped up in it. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. It's all we've got time for, but thank you everyone who tuned in live. And if you're watching this back, I hope you enjoyed it. We've got lots more Inkspots events coming. We have Michael Morpurgo and Frank Cottrell Boyce next week. We've got Rob Biddulph doing a drawing session, Isabella Tree about Weir Wilding. So do tune in for some in the following weeks. And I hope the rest of you have a brilliant weekend. Thank you, Sita.
Pleasure.
Thank you. Bye-bye.